Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Radha Madhava Ki. Hare Krishna and welcome to our Gita Jayanti program. So we will have some katha on the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, since today we celebrate the appearance day of our most sacred scripture, translated as the Song of God. Bhagavat means from Bhagavan, and the Gita is the song. And I'm going to read a few different verses in due course, so we don't have a particular verse on the board. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we celebrate not just the appearance of the Bhagavad Gita, particularly in our line, or we must say also in our institution. We celebrate the Bhagavad Gita as it is. There's a particular purpose why Srila Prabhupada called the Bhagavad Gita, that he translated and commented as the Bhagavad Gita as it is. And in a few shlokas I would also like to read some purports that give us a bit glimpse into the mood and mission of Srila Prabhupada, our founder Acharya or spiritual master, because there are plenty of translations of the Bhagavad Gita, different types of commentaries, and they differ from each other. Of course, everyone might claim, but our our translation, our commentary is the commentary. And there are standards in terms of Sanskrit language, and it's all about interpretation of language, but also about logic, which is involved in that. And Srila Prabhupada pointed out a few things where he said that's why many Bhagavad Gita commentaries, as you find them, are not actually in tune with the essential message of the Bhagavad Gita or the essential understanding. There are two types of Bhagavad Gitas. Those who have an impersonal interpretation and those who have a personal interpretation. And Srila Prabhupada is, of course, presenting the personalist or personal interpretation of the Bhagavad Gita. Simply the term Bhagavan, for example, is crucial in that understanding. Whereas Bhagavan might be translated as powerful person, Srila Prabhupada highlighted and actually coined the term the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That means Bhagavan. Because if you translate Bhagavan just as powerful person, it's not something unique. Different people can be Bhagavan, different personalities. So what Srila Prabhupada clearly said, no, who speaks here is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it's a person, it's not an impersonal concept. Because some translations of the Bhagavad Gita go in this direction. So most of you know that. I just want to make this part of the glorification. And that we have here also a very unique devotional translation and commentary based on also many great saints in this line who give us insights and understanding of what is this conversation between Arjuna and Krishna, and this divine conversation in 18 chapters that we chanted today up to the 13th chapter with the Sanskrit. Also some claim that the battlefield of Kurukshetra, where this Bhagavad Gita was spoken or sung, is rather to be understood allegorically, indirectly, so that it means the body and the 5 Pandavas, since they turn out to be 5, so they are the 5 senses. And of course one can make an allegory out of everything. It could be used, but it's not essentially this meaning. And Srila Prabhupada makes clear, no, there is a historical place called Kurukshetra, Dharmakshetra, where you can go, where you visit, and it happened. These people are historical people, and there's relationship. So these are some things that make this Bhagavad Gita as it is, as we celebrate it, unique. And we highlight that and we emphasize it, because also our spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, is glorified in one of his pranam mantras with Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyade Shatarini. Nirvishesha Shunyavadi refers to impersonal, that the monists and nihilists, so to speak, and like Srila Prabhupada having the mood of kind of defeating or like rejecting such types of philosophies, leading to some kind of spiritual suicide, you would say. So that's something very essential, the personal aspect of Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the Bhagavad Gita is the heart piece of the Mahabharata, and when you start reading the Bhagavad Gita, we find that that we are on a dramatic climax, so to speak. A great battle is to be fought, and now suddenly Arjuna gets into a crisis. And the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is also entitled, there are different titles to the chapters, Vishada Yoga, which means yoga of lamentation, where Arjuna gets into a state of lamenting his situation, where he's forced to fight even against family members and so on. So it's a whole theme for itself. Like this is a way also, lamentation can be a way of connecting with the Lord. So we spoke about that last time more elaborately. There was a whole seminar going on, so I will not enter this topic again too much. The first verse of the Bhagavad Gita is a question, and it is raised by the personality called Dhritarashtra. So he inquires, he says, there's the speaker, Sanjaya. Sanjaya is a person who was blessed by the great sage Vyasadeva to have the vision to be practically like live. He had we would call it today perhaps a live stream. Something was going on from what he could see it directly and reveal and tell it. And Dhritarashtra was a blind person, blind by birth, became also blind internally to some degree. And he inquires, what did my sons and the sons of Pandu do when they assembled at this battlefield? Which is a very which is a question that brings up the question, why is he asking that? You know, when people assemble at a battlefield, it's clear what they plan to do. The acharyas explain he's still hoping that maybe things can be settled peacefully, but to his favor, that they remain the kings, like he and his son Duryodhana. Or he was also concerned like whether his sons would really win. So he had doubts about that. And Dhritarashtra, the name, means someone who seizes or snatches away others' land. So that's the very meaning of his name, and that's also what he did. He's one of three brothers, Pandu, Vidura, and himself. All of them originate from the great sage Vyasadeva. And there's a whole story why Dhritarashtra was blind by birth. It's another story. But this disqualified him from being a king. But he, due to destiny's arrangement, was able to temporarily take the throne until his nephews, the Panospu's nephews, would be old enough or fit enough to rule. But what happened is his own son, Duryodhana, the eldest one of 100, was not at all into sharing the kingdom, which was also rightfully half of it, at least theirs. And he represents envy. The very name of Duryodhana means a nefarious fighter. That means by all means, however irreligious or low class and unethical they are, he will use all means to just get what he wants. And this is being shown in various ways in the Mahabharata. Dhritarashtra represents attachment, Duryodhana envy. And these are two great obstacles for any spiritual advancement. And the Bhagavad Gita is a lot about fighting and dealing with attachments to the material world. There's the fight on this battlefield, where soldiers were fighting with weapons. But then there's the fight we all fight in our daily lives. This is with our characteristics, with our attachments, with our envy and so on. So this way it becomes universal, the message. And the fight, and then Krishna gives so many instructions in the Bhagavad Gita that deal with how to overcome the attachments, cut the ties of illusion. Because Arjuna comes in the same situation. He is lamenting due to attachments. And what does attachment mean? Attachment, of course, you being connected. You attach to something, like you attach a phone to this kind of stand. But also it means like you bind yourself to something. Or like you invest yourself then. You know, if we say I'm too attached to something, means there's some type of the simple picture of a knot is being used, that you're tied. There's also one meaning of the word guna. Material nature consists of 3 gunas and they tie us. And then we become dedicated servants of that what we are attached to. And the problem is, if we are that, we cannot at the same time also serve our spiritual needs. Also in the New Testament, Jesus takes that kind of metaphor, saying you cannot serve 2 lords. You cannot serve riches and matter, so to speak, and the Lord at the same time, because we will favor one and disfavor the other, and at some point you must decide, and one you will betray, more or less. So although we are on both tracks mostly, the idea is that we get situated on the one track, which is our spiritual interest, our relationship with Krishna. That's what it is about. And there will be challenges, there will be setbacks. We all know that, you know. And the idea is to keep up the fight. And that's also what Arjuna is being advised. He has so many ideas. Oh, why not to fight? but also we got our fights, and we might become disheartened at times because it's maybe a difficult fight to fight. But Krishna is encouraging, no, you do fight, and also I will bless your abilities to do that fight if you come from the right place. And we hear that Krishna gives us a very strong, not just hint, he actually explicitly says that in the 4th chapter, in the 9th chapter, and in the 18th chapter, what is required so that we can benefit most from the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita. And this is by becoming his friend and devotee. In the 4th chapter, he clearly tells Arjuna, because you are my devotee and also my friend, I reveal this sacred or the sciences to you today, because you are able to understand the mystery of that science. Because you are a devotee and my friend. So what does devotee mean? Someone who dedicates himself to the pleasure and to the service of the Lord. Invests his time and energy to cultivate his knowledge of Krishna, of God, his relationship, his service to the Lord. Friend refers to something more intimate. Srila Prabhupada also explains Arjuna, of course, is on the transcendental platform, means liberated from anything that we can call material. That what is called Sakya Rasa, or this friendshiply relationship with Krishna, does not happen as long as one is influenced by material nature. It happens then when one has attained liberation and is advanced in devotional service to that degree that this relationship can blossom. So Arjuna was a liberated person, and he had this intimate friendship of Krishna face to face. We don't have Krishna face to face in that sense. But we can be friendshiply. What do friends do? Of course, they're supportive. They want to also see the other friend happy. That's what friends do. So we can, this way, be servants in a mood also of friendship with the Lord. So this might be something we consider. But like this particular being my friend comes on a higher platform. And in the 9th chapter, Krishna says practically the same thing when he reveals further knowledge, and he says it's the first chapter, the first verse of the 9th chapter, where he says, "And because you are never envious of me, you're my friend, and you're never envious of me, therefore I reveal even more of this knowledge to you." So it goes a bit further and cites another important quality that is required to enter the mystery of the Bhagavad Gita, to understand it. And this is the freedom from envy. And Duryodhana, for example, he was completely ruled by envy. There was no chance for him to be really God conscious. And if you look at it also, he got so much chastisement, also even from Dhritarashtra, his own father. And although Dhritarashtra was very attached to his also own son, and he let him do so many things, he became complicit in so many unethical, irreligious actions. But at times, he seriously also rebuked Duryodhana, but there was no point. Duryodhana was not receptive at all for the instructions of anyone. He just was convinced of what his entitlement, and he was ruled by his envy. And even if his father made a clear and a strong point, he could just still get away with stuff he wanted to do. Even as far when it came inviting Krishna, when he was on his peace mission, because Krishna didn't force the war, he actually intended to stop it. And there's Krishna's peace mission that's described in the Mahabharata. So the idea first was, though, Dhritarashtra and also the other kings, they agreed, let's get into Verhandlungen, how to say, in peace, negotiations with Krishna. He's neutral. He likes the Kurus, the Kauravas and the Pandavas alike. And Dhritarashtra was happy. He said, let's provide him with nice, with a great palace, with great gifts, and with this and that. And he got enthusiastic and appreciated Krishna. He knew Dhritarashtra was blind, though materially, but he actually had quite some knowledge. And he knew Krishna as the Supreme Person. He had that understanding. So, and he wanted also Krishna to be there, and said, okay, we could negotiate, of course, in his favor. He hoped that he will get the whole kingdom. And then Vidura checked him, saying, wait a second, what you're doing is not correct. You're doing it with the wrong motivation. You try to bribe Krishna practically. This is not devotion, this is not friendship. This is just trying to cut a deal with the Lord, which is not also dishonest. And Dhritarashtra understood, okay, he was actually touched, but Duryodhana, he at the end, he agreed with the idea, but completely twisted it, making it a completely just political maneuver, and openly suggested, let's capture Krishna if he doesn't agree to our proposals. And also there, Dhritarashtra, at one point, he severely spoke against Duryodhana, but Duryodhana was already too late, and Dhritarashtra was too attached to really go to follow through with checking his own son. So it came that Duryodhana wanted to invite Krishna when he came to be his guest. Here we have a nice palace for you, the palace of Dushasana, which was a very great offender toward Draupadi. But he had the greatest palace, so Krishna was invited there, but he said, no, I will not stay. Duryodhana also said, here we prepared nice food for you, please accept offering. He said, no, I will not eat. He was very blunt with Duryodhana, no. And he cited two reasons. He said, two reasons for a messenger like me to eat is either love is involved, or one is in very distressful circumstances, one has to. He said, we have love for each other, and neither am I in distress, so I will not eat. I'd rather go to Vidura's place. And Duryodhana got quite upset about that, because he tried to keep the game of hey, I'm your friendly host, so please accept my devotional offerings. And this is also instructive, it's not working. The external show of trying to do something for Krishna while being internally even inimical towards him, maybe deny Krishna as the Supreme Person, is not working. And let's get back to in the purport, Srila Prabhupada, for example, in the 9th chapter, he addresses this non-enviousness, how it is required, and relates to the translations of the Bhagavad Gita. He says, the Sanskrit word anasuyave in this verse is also very significant. Generally, the commentators, even if they are highly scholarly, are all envious of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even the most erudite scholars write on Bhagavad Gita very inaccurately. Because they are envious of Krishna, their commentaries are useless. The commentaries given by devotees of the Lord are bona fide. No one can explain Bhagavad Gita or give perfect knowledge of Krishna if he is envious. One who criticizes the character of Krishna without knowing him is a fool. So such commentaries should be very carefully avoided. For one who understands that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the pure and transcendental personality, these chapters will be very beneficial. So very important understanding. Envy can be quite obvious, it can be hidden as well. The quality of envy. I can observe it in myself. Of course it's not pleasant to look at, and of course I try to know, okay, I'm not that envious. Okay. And it can be counteracted by sincere service and appreciation. Because envy usually is, I don't grant someone this or this and that. The counteract would be, okay, I grant, or I support, or I facilitate even the success of others. It would be the greatest, the bitter pill for the envious part in us. Duryodhana was also once put in a situation where he had a chance to kind of transform his anger, his envy, at least to some degree. It didn't work though. When Yudhishthira got his half of the kingdom, and Indraprastha, and the Rajasuya sacrifice was about to happen, the custom is all of the guests from all over the world come and give gifts to the king, to the emperor. So Krishna took the service of washing everyone's feet, which is quite a task, many people were coming and Krishna was washing the feet of everyone. And Duryodhana's task was to receive the gifts that were meant for Yudhishthira. So through his hands, everything passed for Yudhishthir. So he could see that, and of course that triggered this. I don't know how he accepted or got the service, but it's kind of remarkable that he did. This would have been an option to say, wait a second, if the whole world praises that man, why should not I acknowledge that? Why should not also I, see some greatness in him, qualities, like with the others? But he was just not willing to give anything. He was really consumed by his own envy. So, and therefore Krishna is pointing out, like, there's no way to please me like that. And then he spoke also very hard with Duryodhana in the peace negotiations that took place. He actually said that is interesting, I can... back to the situation where he was invited to eat. Maybe I read you quote unquote. Krishna speaks and says, "O Bharata, whoever becomes antagonistic toward a virtuous man, impelled by lust or anger, should be known as the vilest of men. He does not keep his prosperity for long. On the other hand, he who wins over virtuous men with services and kind words, even though they may not be dear to him, gains great renown in the world. Your food is defiled by wickedness. I will not eat it. I prefer instead to stay with Vidura and eat his food." Leaving Duryodhana fuming, Krishna left the hall and returned to Vidura's house. So that was how he left him there. And when the peace negotiations started, Krishna said to Dhritarashtra, "May there be peace between the Kurus and Pandavas, O Bharata. May no heroes be slain on either side. Only for this I have come, O king. I have nothing more to say." It was very clear, very straight. That's it. And then later he just elaborated, saying, "Okay, Dhritarashtra, you are in power. It's your thing to check your son. That's all. I will not agree to or anything else than the rightful share of the kingdom. Half. Fair. But we know how it turned out. Like, Duryodhana even attempted to capture Krishna, which he amusingly accepted, and then manifested even his universal form, which is a great blessing. The universal form is rarely seen. It means out of his body the demigods manifested, like the universe was visible practically. But Duryodhana ultimately rationalized it as, I must be a great powerful mystic. That's it. His envy completely covered his capacity to see. And so therefore it is so important to also check in ourselves what is our most inner relationship with Krishna and God. How do we acknowledge him or not acknowledge him in his position? There are interesting purports in the Bhagavad Gita. I forgot the verse, but Srila Prabhupada then writes there are devotees who are engaged in devotional service, but internally they do not accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. So they do that, they're engaged in this whole service, but deep inside, they actually don't have full faith or the attitude that Krishna is the Supreme Lord. And not just that the Supreme Lord is Krishna and instead it's someone else. It's more like the general view or attitude, there is a personal God, he is there, and I'm his eternal part and parcel, meant to serve him and have a relationship. That this is there, it can be, even if you're on this path, and deep down in your heart you might not be though convinced of it. We find it also in other spheres of life, So therefore, it's very important to be introspective and conscious. Where do I stand? What are my deeper beliefs? And how do I relate to Krishna? And if I find, actually, maybe I have sincere doubts, there are devotees who, after many years of following this path, they turn to what is some so-called monistic path of spirituality, impersonal. How come? Because deep down the faith was never really there. It did not come to to the awakening of that relationship to Krishna. Or I turn another way, it's just away, you know. Why is that? Why would we turn away from something? Because we don't have faith. Naturally, you know. You can only do something really with conviction if you have full faith. Or you push yourself to some degree because out of fear it could also be. Or, but it's not as powerful as when you do something out of deep faith and connection. So Krishna is encouraging that with in so many ways, saying Manmana bhavamat bhakto madhyachimam namaskuru. Think of me, bow down to me, give your homage to me, become my devotee. And in this way, become purified. So it's an invite, and also in a sense a challenge to accept our relationship with Krishna, the person. Not just with the divine that we could benefit from for our purposes, but to truly allow, and fully embrace the idea that we are eternally in a relationship with Him, and that He is the Lord and we are the servants. But not like slave, master and slave, of course, but more like as a nature that we have. And also in the 18th chapter, Krishna again, which is this chapter is called it's a summary of the Bhagavad Gita. He again highlights. He's saying, "Okay, this most confidential knowledge I reveal to you because you are my very dear friend." He says, over and over it comes. So what is required to become friendly with Krishna, to become His devotee, and cultivate a sincere service attitude toward Him, and this will allow us access into the mysteries of the Bhagavad Gita gradually. Of course, this involves the association with advanced devotees, as Krishna says also in the Bhagavad Gita, to find, to follow a bona fide spiritual master and so on. But essentially, besides that, it is also about this inner attitude and cultivating desire for Krishna, for being with Krishna. Nurture that. Because it's a natural tendency of a conditioned soul. If we suffer or we are in need, or we are as long into, let's say, a spiritual path, as long we have a certain condition that forces us, kind of like suffering, for example. And then when suffering is done, or I might just use that path to heal, or to get what I want, and then not necessarily keep on going for the sake of cultivating the relationship with God, but more because I needed something from God, and now if I have it, okay, fine, till next time when I'm in need. Krishna does that anyway. He's very kind and generous. But what does it mean for us? That it shows deep inside we are not willing, if we have that, we are not really willing to allow that type of relationship, eternal relationship. Only in need. And we truly dedicate to it. Yeah, and it's a wonderful service, for example, also today, what we did to absorb in the text of the Bhagavad Gita by simply reciting it, dedicating time and energy and our mind to absorb in that. That's what Krishna says. Manmana bhavamat bhakto. Think of me, become my devotee. That means also Srila Prabhupada says, study Krishna's words. Hear Krishna's words over and over. Let them ring in your mind. And the messages he gives. And accepting them with faith, that means you allow that what is there written is true. You can, of course, doubt it. There's reasonable doubt, but there's also blind doubt, as there's blind faith. And of course, also it's important to be cautious. When do I just blindly believe without really understanding? But also, when do I doubt blindly, without being really open for good answers or arguments? So yes, that's something I wanted to address. Because anyway, we don't have such a long class, keep it rather short for the evening. Are there any comments or questions from your side. I don't know if you have an extra, because this, I think the battery's off, but.
I just say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you described the character of Duryodhana nicely, but there is one incident in Mahabharata which is kind of surprising, knowing the character of Duryodhana.
Mm-hmm.
At the end, when he was lying in a deathbed, and Ashwatthama came after beheading the sons of Pandavas, right?
Mm-hmm.
And came thinking that his master Duryodhana will be pleased to hear his heinous act. And then it is described Duryodhana wasn't at all pleased. He was disgusted.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting twist of the story there. That he wasn't that bad after all.
Mm-hmm.
You can comment on this if you have insights.
Not really insights. I mean, now I will get myself the bigger version of the Mahabharata to get more of the stories. Just what comes to my mind is like, yeah, person undergoes change of mind or change of heart or becomes introspective at time of death. You know, if you say he laid on his deathbed, it changes things for people. You know, your consciousness might become different. You know, many people also show regrets that they didn't show all their life when they about to die. So maybe Duryodhana got also introspective and moved a bit by the approaching end of his, I don't know. Yeah, but certainly in everyone there's something good. No one is thoroughly bad, you know. There's at least some spark. Yeah, he also had some values, yeah. But they were flexible for his purposes. Mm.
And what's the most inspired thing you took out from the Gita for your personal life?
Well, need to think about it for a moment. I mean, just from recently, since we talked about the first chapter, that also being in a state of lamentation, materially affected, can be a way to approach Krishna, like as Arjuna approached Krishna with lamentation. So that I don't have to be already pure and self-realized, so that I can connect to Krishna in a way. Also, wherever I stand, there is some possibility or capability. And for me, also, what is the 13th chapter. What I find inspiring is like nature and joy and consciousness. When it's very philosophically explained what the relationship between soul, matter, and Krishna or God is. And the clarity, you know. I mean, it wasn't always clear to me. It took some reading and studying over years to really kind of grasp the concept. Yeah, that's something. And or in different chapters, there are various places. I particular like also the verse 1855, how Krishna like points out like how his kingdom is accessible for those who have love for Krishna, and that he actually wants that Krishna wants to bring us to the point that we go back to him. So that's something I take this, is that he actually, his concern is, well, you might live here if you like to, but actually I would like to have you back. I think that's something that stays with me quite strongly.
Another point, I think, the 13th chapter also in the end, Prabhupada writes that especially this chapter you have to understand with the help of spiritual master.
Mm-hmm.
And how we can realize this, because we don't have always spiritual master teaching us the Gita.
Mm-hmm. I guess that's an effort given to us where we have to also put some faith in the Lord and develop sincere intention to meet those devotees. I mean, spiritual master means essentially a person who is on a certain level of realization that he or she can instruct you on that, can enlighten you. Guru means someone who dissipates darkness, someone who brings enlightenment. So you might have your initiating spiritual master, and depending whether he is either interested, so willing a particular topic, or like able to instruct you in a given circumstance about that, might be one thing. But to find also shiksha, to see what devotees have, the type of answers that I might need, and to be on the search as we had been perhaps before. And yes, that's something that also stuck with me in the 13th chapter at the end when Prabhupada says that. He actually mentions that this chapter is the most important. It's sometimes confusing because sometimes we hear this chapter is the most important. But there he says this is the most important chapter because it's Sambandha Gyan. The essential thing we got to understand with the help of the spiritual master. It should be thoroughly studied over and over again. That means you also read it over and over again, you hear classes on it again, and you try to discuss. And always cultivate a desire, like the acharyas also pray, when will the day come that I meet that and that person that gives me some valuable instructions or insights on what that means, what is written there. Can I recommend you Gopi Pranadhana Prabhu's classes also. He's a very realized person when it comes to also this whole Upanishadic philosophy. He has very good instructions, at least to listen, like not directly from him to you or me, but something he taught.
Thank you for the class. I think it's a very nice theme you chose, and it's a very nice introductory class, because what you spoke about is really what Prabhupada speaks about in the introduction, how we should approach the Gita.
Mm-hmm.
You spoke about the friendship, and when you read the introduction, Prabhupada, the first point he makes is Krishna is the supreme person, and we at least have to theoretically accept, and then we have to approach the Gita in a spirit of devotion. And I find it a very nice point, because often you also mentioned there's so many Bhagavad Gitas and so many people read, and they all get their own conclusions, but to really have a relationship to Bhagavad Gita, you have to approach it in this way. And often, due to the modes, and especially the lower modes, people they approach in Rajagul, for example, they want to get something out of it.
Mm-hmm.
They will read and something, let's say they want to get some understanding how to become more happy materially, or they want to support their own views, something. But if somebody manages to at least in more sattvic approach that, let's just see what's in there and let's accept what Prabhupada says. And of course, even better in a mood of devotion, like spirit of devotion, like Prabhupada says. And this one story comes to mind in Chaitanya Charitamrita in South India, where there was this one Brahmana, and he was blind, and he would always sit in front of the temple and have the Bhagavad Gita, and being blind he couldn't read, but he was always crying, and then all the other Brahmanas would make fun of him. And then one person asked him, why are you crying? And he said, just by thinking how Krishna became the charioteer of Arjuna, I feel so emotional, I have to cry. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said he actually has understood Bhagavad Gita. And if you think about deeply, he really got the realization about who Krishna is as a person. And that's how much Bhagavad Gita can give to someone who is just open to serve the spiritual master. And yeah, and that's something I find really good. And how even great devotees, they find so much nectar in Bhagavad Gita, even though it's ABC of spiritual knowledge. So yeah, thank you for that lecture. I mean, it inspires to approach the Bhagavad Gita in a nice mood. service.
Yeah.
Once I was speaking in Wiel to a Christian, and we had a heating discussion, and we shared the numbers. 1 week later he called me and he said he wants the Bhagavad Gita. So I went to his home and I gave him the Bhagavad Gita, and then even some weeks later he called me and they made a religion school day, and then I was there and spoke about Krishna consciousness. Later they came with the school class to the temple, and he said he wanted to prepare a little bit for this day and read a little bit Bhagavad Gita, but on this day he had another Bhagavad Gita with him, like an impersonal Bhagavad Gita. So I found it very sad. I gave him Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, but then he wrote another Bhagavad Gita to prepare himself. Yeah, maybe he was afraid.
Yes, that's also something. Srila Prabhupada is, for many in a way, unpleasant, because he speaks quite strongly philosophical points that not necessarily are to the liking of people. There's a clear demand. he said, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and your position is to be his servant. Which first sounds to people like, what? Someone wants to force us for something? But it's philosophically very sound and valid and makes sense. But people don't necessarily like that. And if someone also strongly not just suggests, but also says one should and must, of course, Srila Prabhupada argues very clear and without compromise. And that's not necessarily the spirit of the time for many people, particularly in spiritual circles, Yeah, and I guess that's something we got to, have in mind, That's where it's important to, when a devotee also has to find ways to lead people toward that, without compromising too much. But sometimes it's about finding ways to, to meet people halfway, so to say, also in understanding. But first one must be grounded in one's own faith, and then find ways to truly inspire others. Of course you cannot just pull others in whether they want or not, it's about gradually, if they see this Bhagavad Gita works for you and you have found your ground in it philosophically, that's the best thing we can do. And sometimes also it might be that people then say it's not for me, and then okay, maybe not now, it's not for you. Because some other devotees do, by hook and crook, try to get people into us. I find that sometimes it's also sad on the other hand, No, we are very nice, no Bhagavad Gita is no religion, Bhagavad Gita isn't this and that. It's like what you're looking for. And okay, sometimes quite watered down. This is what Bhagavad Gita is. And then if they read this book, then they find, but this guy in the book speaks another language than the guy who gave me the book, then it might also be difficult. We don't have to, people pleasers, And at the same time, but also we got to have some sensitivity to where do these people stand and how do we pass it on in the most effective way. But the good thing is, after a heated discussion, he called you up, invited you to his school. I would consider it success. Maybe now Krishna tests your patience a bit. Okay, here I gave him an impersonal interpretation. What do you do with that? All right. Thank you very much. Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki.